Ted, you have to forgive me now because the blue on our printers expired and has been for a while. Carla, if you're watching, we need to get color cartridges. Here we go. So anyway, it looks like Ted Yantia. Ted, I'm sorry if I get it wrong. It's very, very hard for me to read. But he's got a great question. It got the most upticks, so we're going to start with that one. And it was this. Could you speculate how life would be different had the standard for electricity been Edison's DC, direct current, instead of Tesla's AC? For one, we would not have a massive power grid because generators would need to be more local, as DC power losses are too great over distance to be practical. Would we have come up with a better efficient batteries by now had there been a need for them way sooner than the electric cars need for massive power cells? I don't know anything really about that issue, Ted, which is why I'm delighted to talk about it for 15 minutes. Look, the difference between AC and DC, for those of you who don't know, is that the alternating current, the first electrical systems were designed with direct current, which makes sense. You just push electrons down a wire and the current goes one way. Tesla discovered that alternating current, which went back and forth, which is what we're using, is more efficient to transmit electricity over long distances. And in order to prove how deadly Tesla's championing of alternative current AC was, Edison had an elephant electrocuted. Not by accident. He just basically got an elephant to stand there, and he hooked up the legs to alternating current and threw the switch, and the elephant died. Just caught fire, down. And Edison did this to show people how dangerous AC was. And to me, it's an indication of what kind of person Edison was. And as I get older and older and further away from the Wizard of Menlo Park, I realized that Edison was, like many great people, a not very nice man. He was buddies with Henry Ford, and he wasn't a very nice man. But they did change the world. People say, well, he didn't invent the light bulb. Some other guy maybe in Tasmania invented the light bulb 16 years earlier. Well, there's number one, there's no evidence, and number two, if you invent the light bulb in a cave someplace and nobody finds out about it, then you didn't really, what difference does it make at this point? So here's why I wanted to take this question, because there's two things in here that I think are really interesting. One of them is there's a lot of Tesla worship going on out there, and this is the fallacy of the untaken path. I don't know if that's an actual term, but I just invented it. So basically what it says is, what I'm saying is when you go down one road, by definition, you don't go down the other. And so as you go down the road that you've chosen to go down, there are pros and cons, good things and bad things, and you endure them. But you can imagine what life would be like on the other road, and that is almost always a better road in your mind. The road that we didn't take, especially if we run into real difficulties, is fraught with real-world disappointments and real-world problems, and we assume that the road that we didn't take is going to be much, much better. I just have to do this. It's driving me nuts here. Sorry, one second. Frame composition is everything. So on that level, there's that. And there's a lot of people who talk about Tesla, who I have a lot of respect for, and certainly Tesla got screwed by by Edison badly. But a lot of people think that Tesla had the ability to transmit basically unlimited free energy through static electricity. And that if we'd listened to Tesla, we would have our houses all be making their own electricity. We wouldn't need any of this, power stations and all the rest. That seems highly unlikely to me. And so, so many times people get this kind of idea that if we had done something else, then everything would have been smooth sailing. Classic example of this is the Kennedy assassination. A lot of people said John Kennedy was trying to get us out of Vietnam, and if only Kennedy had not been assassinated, then the Vietnam War as we know it never would have happened. We don't know that to be true. He may have escalated the Vietnam War. We don't know. But when you get into that road not taken thinking, you think, well, if John Kennedy hadn't been assassinated, we would have been out of Vietnam. And then you think, and if we were out of Vietnam, then we wouldn't have had all of the problems of the 60s. And then you think if we didn't have all the problems of the 60s, and all of these university professors would be in positions of power and money, and then this is just it's very attractive, it's very lucrative. So there's that. And then the other thing that I think is important, I'll scooch over to the left and take advantage of what these people are telling me on the comment stream. And the other thing I'm interested in this is this. Is that Ted's question talks a little bit about the electric grid, and this is the single greatest vulnerability that we have. I listened to an incredible briefing by Frank Gaffney, who's a person I've worked with and I like very much. Very, very smart, patriotic man. And basically, there is a terrorist attack that nobody's heard of, and it's not invented, and it's not, it's real. It happened. And I don't remember the date, so excuse me for this, but it was after 9/11, and it turned out that a bunch of people in vans with AK-47s went to a critical electrical switching station up in Silicon Valley, and they started shooting up the station with AK-47s, and they started knocking out these transformers and these power units and all the rest. And they cut the control lines to that power station, to that switching station. They knew where they were. They cut 5 control lines, and as it turns out, there was a sixth one that they didn't know about. And as this thing got shot up with AK-47 bullets and started to overheat, the engineers were able to basically shut off that electrical system and save it from melting. Here's what's so horrifying about this. Frank Gaffney tells me that the actual machine in question, the thing that does the actual shifting of the power and pushing it down the road and so on, it's just enormous. It's a ton or two. And here's the part that's really scary. It is absolutely unique to that power station. It's not like we have 50 of them on the shelf, and if one of them gets destroyed, we can just pull another one off the shelf. Each one is custom built to the power station because it got, our electrical grid built slowly over 100 years. So here's what's interesting, is if they hadn't known about that, if they had known about that 6 control wire and cut those communication cables, then that power transmission station would have melted. And that wouldn't have been an explosion, and it wouldn't have been Chernobyl, it wouldn't have been anything. But it would mean that Silicon Valley and all of the South Bay and San Francisco, probably including up to San Francisco, would have been without electricity for 6 months. 6 months. Maybe a year. 6 months to a year. 5 guys with AK-47s in a van could have basically crippled the tech heart of America. And that tells me that 5, 6, 7, 8 guys with AK-47s strategically placed around the country, and you don't need many more than 20, 30 of these teams at the tops. You probably could get by with 5 or 6. If these teams go out there and do something very simple, which is just shoot through a chain link fence with an AK-47, it's not like they're trying to get to the president. It's not like they're trying to get inside the control room of a nuclear reactor. If they just shot up enough of these things, we would be out of power for years. And if this country lost electrical power for years, it would be the Stone Age. It would be the Stone Age. Even if we got all the assistance in the world in the military, there's 300 million people in this country, and large numbers of them are in inner cities. And when the power goes out, not only do you not have an ATM or an internet, that's your immediate problem. No internet and no lights. And that problem lasts for about 6 hours, maybe 12 hours, at which point you begin to realize, okay, this is going on long. So you go down to the ATM to get some money out, and the ATM doesn't work. And all of the cash registers at the stores don't work. And even if you went and stole the stuff or wrote an IOU or whatever, within 2 or 3 days, all of the food in the supermarkets will begin to rot because the food is stored in refrigerated areas, and so they require electricity. Water doesn't get pumped, and you've got whatever water you've got in the house. If you're smart enough to have not used your toilet, you can drink that for a while. This is what we're talking about, and we're talking about it all across the country. You don't need an electronic EMP attack. You can just do it with guys with AK-47s. You can do it with a nuke exploded in space and get a pulse that'll do essentially the same thing and bring down the power grid. But here's all I wanted to say about that, and the main reason I took this question, aside from the fact that it was a first-rated question. This is the kind of thing where you have a known problem and you don't do anything about it. A critical known problem, and you don't do anything about it. And the reason you don't do anything about it is because it'd be very expensive, very time consuming, and it hasn't happened yet. And this is the great This is the actual hole in the human psyche. This is what gets us into so much trouble. Something catastrophic could happen. Yes, that's true. And we know that this could happen now because of this defect, right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So we should fix it, right? Well, it hasn't happened yet. Maybe we could talk about it after the next mission. And the more you get by without it, the more likely you are to just assume that it's going to be okay. And I can give you 3 examples of this. One is the one I just gave you, the electric grid of the United States. We wake up one day and all these things have been taken down. We're not going to know about it from the news because there's not going to be any news. But if all the electricity in the country goes out, we will have known that we could have done something about this, which means we could have hardened these facilities, could put some armor around those cooling areas, and we could have these transformers be standardized, so you just had them scattered all throughout the United States, and if you had to, you get one off the shelf, put it on a truck, on a flatbed, haul it down to the power station, and get your power back in 2 days. But no, we don't do that because it hasn't happened yet. Second example of this kind of wishful thinking is the Challenger, which we knew that the Challenger space shuttle, we knew that the entire space shuttle program had been endangered by poor O-rings on the external boosters, on the external, the solid rocket boosters, the SRBs on the side of the tank. And prior to Challenger exploding, we knew that these were bad seals. And the reason we knew is because we recovered those at the end of the mission. At the beginning of the mission, they come off the tank, they parachute down, we get them back, and we recycle them, and we kind of rehab them and get them ready to go. And they were finding for a number of missions, that this O-ring was leaking and could have catastrophically destroyed the mission, but it didn't, so they kept going. And they kept going until it got cold enough so that the O-rings actually froze even worse, and then the shuttle blew up. And the final example is the Columbia. The Columbia, we knew that with this new environmentally friendly foam that they're putting on the external tank, we knew that this external tank, as it's going up through the air and goes through supersonic speeds, that bits of foam were coming off of the tank. And people knew that this was not supposed to be happen. It didn't happen before we went to the environmentally friendly foam. So is this good? Is this bad? We didn't check. It didn't cause us any problems. And foam was coming off of those tanks again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And then one day, the foam came off and hit the leading edge of the Columbia, and 10 days later, 7 people burned up over southern United States because we didn't address a problem that we knew existed. And when Challenger was lost, weeks or months later, engineers took some foam and shot it at the front edge of a wing. Now, the problem is they shot it at the front edge of a wing in an atmosphere. They blew it at the front edge of the wing, didn't do any damage. But where that foam was shedding, the atmosphere is so thin, it's virtually a vacuum. And so when they took the air out of there and shot the foam at 350, 400 miles an hour, whatever the shuttle's going at that speed, it put a hole the size of a washing machine in the leading edge of the Columbia's wing, of a mock-up of the wing. And we could have known this earlier, and we could have done something about it earlier, but we didn't, for the same reason that we're not doing anything here. Now, somebody said, a big spending program, how conservative of you, Bill. I don't know if that's a joke or whether it's a serious criticism. But look, there's 2 things I will say about that. First of all, power companies are private companies. Most of them are anyway. It's Consolidated Edison or whatever. So these are investments that the private companies have to make in order to continue to provide their service. I don't see anything unconservative about that idea. And secondly, things like public works, like roads and electrical grids, in my opinion, are in fact legitimate things that the government needs to be involved with. The government doesn't have to tell Edison how to run its business, but the government can say that there are certain guidelines or certain things that we need to do because all of these things have to work with each other. I don't see any particular contradiction in this, and it's not like I want the big spending program taken out of the general fund, so let's raise taxes. The point I'm saying is this: we are in real danger with the electrical grid. And I say this, I've said this about this election too. Something like the electrical grid, if it happens, we'll be able to say that we were on board the Titanic and we spotted the iceberg 100 miles away. We spotted it on the horizon and we kept sailing closer and closer and closer, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we sailed right towards it. And then to our absolute astonishment, it hits the ship and the ship sinks and we're all in the water, freezing and dying. And we knew it was there. We knew it. We just didn't do anything about it. All right, so much for that. Thanks, Ted.